So one of the lessons that I gathered from my years in ministry was that my job, no matter what I'm doing, is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, right?
Mm.
And so there's this desire for me to. There's a lot of folks out there, probably including myself, who are in positions of some level of power or authority, who could be doing more, who know that there's something off about some of the systems, but who are really comfortable either in their way of life or just don't want to deal with it or don't want to see it, whatever the it is, that might be making them uncomfortable or might be an injustice out in the world. And so I view my role as a podcaster to afflict them in some way, as Jess was saying, to cause some level of discomfort, because that's how change happens, is some level of discomfort. No one changes because they're super happy with everything they're doing in their life.
That's right.
Because change sucks. Like, change is really hard to do.
Yes.
And especially like deep and abiding change that has to do with our biases about how we live into the world, and our identity and all of that. And then there's a lot of folks who are really struggling right now out there, who are trying to figure out what to do and who are just looking for knowledge that they're not alone in this. And so I feel like that's another purpose of my job as a podcaster, as our job as the Radical AI podcast. But to answer your question more directly, these are incredibly difficult, multi-layered, to some degree impossible topics to get at, especially in like an hour-long episode of a podcast, right? And especially when it comes to like sexism and racism, it's and I think this is something that Jess and I are kind of like tied together with in terms of talking about it, but also different because we bring different identities. For myself as a straight white man, like a lot of my research this past year has been about like what would it look like to bring white male accountability into AI product design, right? Like what could that look like? And that was based off of representation work that Timnit was doing. But like what can I do as a podcaster who like I'm very aware, even in this interview, right, of like how much space I'm taking up versus how much space Jess is taking up. And I think there needs to be just a level of intentionality and also a level of just remaining curious about those power systems that are at play. And thankfully, we have a community that's willing to hold us accountable to that. So I wouldn't say that we've gotten into any like big tussles, but we've definitely gotten some, Twitter messages from folks that we really respect, just being like, no, that you shouldn't use that logo. Like, no, you shouldn't. And so it's just a matter of, I think, for us in those difficult conversations, especially around race right now in the U.S., remaining open and curious, and willing to be wrong and name our own positionality as white folks, and for myself as a white man in this.
Yeah. And even, I'm going to definitely ditto that curiosity word. I think that's really important for both Dylan and I and anybody who's in this AI ethics space. And then also humility, definitely. And that comes with that decentering. And three other words and verbs that were coming up for me is actually words that are taken from some interviews that we've done with just some amazing scholars in this space. And the first word is to be compassionate, and that comes from Mary L. Gray. And so to be compassionate towards others, but also to ourselves, and to know that we're not always going to do everything perfectly. And also along with that, just to be kind, both to others and ourselves. And that's from John C. Havens. And lastly, the word that always sticks out and seems to come up in a lot of our interviews is from the amazing scholar Ruha Benjamin, and that's love. So to feel love for ourselves and for this community and for everyone. And that can be such a driving force in this space.
Beautiful. And I want to thank you both for your courage to be addressing these topics that can be extremely uncomfortable, very complicated issues, bringing on guests that you may or may not agree with just to host the conversation, to hear different points of view and expose the data community to these very important discussions, because that's all about education. And it is super hard work, like the work you guys are doing, addressing these topics that make us feel uncomfortable, that make us question our own thinking. It's It can cause a lot of anxiety. It can cause a lot of self-doubt. And so it takes a lot of courage to like be out there, being willing to make a mistake, to say the wrong thing in a live interview, to realize and just own up to, like, I didn't say that right. I probably should have said it this way next time. But that takes a lot of courage and humility. So I want to give you guys props for helping to lead these conversations, to expose the world to important discussions. So thank you for all your work. Again, for those who missed it maybe in the beginning, where do they go? Where do they download your podcast?
Sure. So the first place to go is radicalai.org, which is our home base. That's our website. You can find all our episodes, all of our partnerships, our blog, which we should probably update soon. So hard to stay on top of a blog, even during quarantine. So there's a lot of different ways to get connected there. I think specifically people can connect with us. The best way to connect with us is either via email, which you can find on the website, or via Twitter. We're at Radical AI Pod. And specifically in the past week from when we're recording this, we have launched a Patreon page as we continue to grow as an organization to help fund some of that development as we move towards being more of an educational nonprofit beyond just the podcast. And so hopefully we can put that in the show notes for folks if they feel so called to donate.
Thank you so much for listening to this clip of the Data Talk podcast. To check out the full show or see the full catalog of previous episodes, go to Experian.com/Data Talk.